It was very interesting. Yeah, this was the first time since I started my own authority and really started trucking in general where I had a broker who absolutely needed me more than I needed him, right? Because he needed to haul this load. It was very clear. He needed to get it out of there, which is why he bumped it from 55 to 6, and then I was able to book it for 66, right? Which is fascinating. Peak season, okay, I kind of expected this kind of thing to happen, but this was a very. This broker was in need, I could tell, and I was able to get it. And I don't know, maybe I could have even gotten like 7,000 out of it. Hindsight's always a little 2020, but I just thought that was an interesting story. So, you know, basically for the past couple of years, brokers have not needed carriers. Um, Even during peak season when I was at Landstar, it was pretty okay. There was a little more equilibrium between what the broker's leverage and my leverage. But this was the first time where I had a broker buy his balls. He needed to haul the load, and $6,600, $279 per mile for a 2,300 mile load, going to the Midwest, which is a good area, is quite good, right? That's pretty decent by any standard. Welcome back to Trucking in the Seven Seas. This is episode number 110, and in this episode, we're going to cover week 40 and 41 of running my own authority. For this episode, we run peak season around Christmas, but have a pretty major mechanical issue that costs us quite a bit. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I started this channel in order to show exactly what truck drivers make. Started as a company driver, working for night transportation, moved on to a lease operator, working for night transportation, then an owner operator, leased on the Landstar, and now we are an owner-operator running our own authority. I show all of the loads I take, what the revenue is, what the expenses are, what my net cash flow is, and I compile all this information that I put into a spreadsheet that I share with you at the end of every video. So if this is a topic that interests you, follow the channel. But a couple of announcements before we begin. I am planning to take time off after Christmas. So I mentioned this in the last video that after Christmas, the market pretty much drops off a cliff in January. So it's a good time to take time off, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So for January, there won't be too many videos posted, and we're not going to be running nearly as hard as we have been running. Second announcement is I can haul for Amazon, but I still have not done so. I've just been running the spot market because it's so far the most profitable market to run. But I can't haul for Amazon. I'm going to haul for Amazon, but I have not yet done so. But I will probably sometime in January run some short loads just to get my rating up. But last episode, we left off in Poncha Springs, Colorado. So we dropped a load in Poncha Springs, then immediately started deadheading back to Phoenix. Basically, there's nothing in Colorado ever, so it's just best to start deadheading to probably Phoenix or maybe Las Vegas, depending on where you are, because, well, Colorado is completely dead. You get about $4 per mile plus to go in there, but coming out of there, it's just no good. So we dropped the load in Poncha Springs, then deadheaded down to Phoenix. And from there, we were trying to find a load pretty much anywhere, whatever the most profitable route was. But as I was starting to discover, Phoenix isn't that great. So it's just not that good down there, which is pretty strange because Phoenix is usually a good market. But for whatever reason, during peak season, which is right now, it actually is worse than normal, which is odd. So I'm just looking at like the load to truck ratio and the loads going into Phoenix and coming out of Phoenix, and it's worse than normal. So like during normal season, it's better than it is right now. And I started to realize this as I ran this week. So we got to Phoenix, couldn't find a whole lot. So I was looking around and I ended up finding this load right here. So this one's going from Surprise, Arizona to Grand Junction, Colorado. It's 775 loaded miles, 337 empty miles. Paid $2,200 at $284 per mile. Yeah, so I just couldn't find a whole lot in Phoenix, so I decided, okay, well, maybe just run into Colorado again would be best. So that's what I ended up doing. So I found this one. Grand Junction is pretty close to, well, not pretty close. It's somewhat close to Vegas. So after you run to Grand Junction, you can actually get to Vegas. And right now, Vegas, unexplainably, is better than Phoenix right now, which is very strange. But that's what we ended up doing, and this is what we ended up finding and going with. So right now we're taking this load from Surprise, Arizona, which is Phoenix, and we're going to Grand Junction, Colorado. Let's go. Okay, so we dropped that load out in Grand Junction, Colorado, and then we just started deadheading straight back to Las Vegas. Best market that was closest to us, so that's what we started doing. We were looking around, and I did search Grand Junction to try to find a load, and there really wasn't anything. There was one load going to New Jersey, which I wasn't going to take, and then there was another one going to Williams, California, which is like Northern California. So I was like, nah, I'm just not going to do any of that. So I just started deadheading. I couldn't find anything. It's dead up there. Colorado is just completely dead. So that's what I did, and started to deadhead back, and then was looking around, and I did actually manage to find this load right here. So this one's going from Cedar City, Utah to Phoenix, Arizona, 434 loaded miles, 0 empty miles, $1,200 at $276 per mile. Yeah, so it's 0 miles of empty because the deadhead is counted from Grand Junction to Cedar City, so that's why it's 0. But yeah, this one was okay. Yeah, it did get me back to a better area, so I grabbed this one from Cedar City, went back to Phoenix, Arizona, $276 per mile for $1,200 got me to a somewhat better area. So that's what I ended up doing. I think it's totally fine. Cedar City, Utah, I mean, to get out of Utah for $276 per mile, I think that's okay. Well, that's more than okay. And actually, Utah isn't too bad right now. I was looking at the load to truck ratios there. It's actually okay up there. So yeah, that's interesting to note. So I grabbed this one. Cedar City, Utah is, I don't know, 200-300 miles south of Salt Lake. It's kind of right in between Vegas and Salt Lake City. Not a huge place, but I was able to find this. It was a load of plastics. So this is what we ended up finding. Booked it, and now we're headed right back to Phoenix, Arizona. Let's go. All right, so we dropped that load out in Phoenix, and I was looking for another one. And at this point, as I was trying to book another load out of Phoenix, this is when I kind of truly started to understand how bad Phoenix is. I don't know why. It's very strange that Phoenix is this bad right now. But I was in Phoenix, I dropped the load. I was in Phoenix. I started looking around. I dropped it in the morning, so it was like 8 in the morning. So I'm like, all right, I'll be able to get out of here now. And, I wasn't able to get out of here last time, but I kind of figured, okay, it might not be great here. But after I dropped this one in Phoenix again, that's when it truly hit me that Phoenix is just a bad market right now. Which is very, very odd. I do not understand why Phoenix is so bad right now, but it is. So I was looking around. I searched for like 3 or 4 hours trying to find something, but I couldn't find anything. Nothing that I would really book, especially when I could just deadhead to Los Angeles and grab something good there. So looking around, and I just couldn't find anything, and I finally just made the executive decision. All right, I'm just going to start deadheading to Indio. It's about noon by the time I decided to do this, and I was looking around for like 3 or 4 hours trying to find something, but I just couldn't find anything. I mean, there were loads available, but nothing that I would book in favor of going to Los Angeles and then grabbing something out of there. Very odd. Just very odd. I guess one of the theories is maybe a lot of guys are running Phoenix right now because of weather, right? It's very nice down there right now. But that doesn't quite explain it because Vegas isn't this bad. So I don't know why it's so bad in Phoenix right now, but it was. So I started deadheading to Los Angeles, Fontana, whatever. And on the way there, I did see a load pop up going from Indio to Cedar Falls, Iowa. It originally was TQL, so it was on the TQL load board for about 5,500. So I called them up, and then they said, oh yeah, there's a stop in Helena, Montana. And I was like, oh, that's okay. I'll pass on that. So he's like, yeah, okay. So hung up, kept driving, right? And then pretty much when I got to Indio, I noticed this load was on there again. So originally it was posted for 5,500. Then it was posted for 6,000, I noticed, right? So the guy upped the pay to 6,000. And I was sort of looking at it, and It was somewhat risky for a couple of reasons. One, the weather was not great, obviously. So if you go to Montana slash across the 90 or wherever you're going to go, obviously it's winter season, so that's a pretty cold area. So there was a weather issue, but I was looking at the weather, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can get to Helena and then start heading east. And there's a break right as I would get there, right? So there's like a 1 to 2 day break, go up to Helena, Montana, drop it, start heading over. And there was a like a winter swell coming. But I was looking at, the weather radar. I'm like, oh, I can get up there, drop it, and then kind of outrun this weather storm that's coming. So I was looking at it, and I'm like, all right, I think this broker needs to haul this load, right? So I was looking at it and looking at it and looking at it. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to call this guy up. He had it, so it was at 55. Then he bumped it up to 6,000. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to call him. I'm going to say 6,600 and see what he says. And that's what I did. So I called him up, called the broker, be like, all right, man, look, I'll do it for 6,600. 66, let me know. Yeah, it's a stop in Montana. And then, go over to Cedar Falls, Iowa, which is kind of by, it's Cedar Falls, Iowa. Just look it up, I guess. But, yeah, 6,600. And he's like, all right, give me a second. And I'm like, I'm just not moving on this rate because this is kind of a rough load. And it also makes it difficult for me to get back for Christmas because I would drop it on like the 17th. And then I would need to basically beat feet straight back to the West Coast to be home for Christmas. So that was another concern of mine. But, so I offered 66 on it. And then he called me back and he's like, all right, man, I'll do 64 and you got it. And I'm like, no, man, 66. I ain't coming down. Like, 66 or nothing. That's what I said. And this was very interesting because this was the first time I had a broker who absolutely needed me to take the load. And I probably could have even juiced out a little more out of him as I'm looking at things. So it's right, if I haven't already posted, it's right here. So it's Indio, California to Helena, Montana / Cedar Falls, Iowa. 2,363 loaded miles, 247 empty miles, paid $6,600 at $279 per mile. And yeah, so that's what I ended up booking it for. And it was very interesting. Yeah, this was the first time since I started my own authority and really started trucking in general where I had a broker who absolutely needed me more than I needed him, right? Because he needed to haul this load. It was very clear. He needed to get it out of there, which is why he bumped it from 55 to 6, and then I was able to book it for 66, right? Which is fascinating. Peak season, okay, I kind of expected this kind of thing to happen, but this was this broker was in need, I could tell, and I was able to get it. And I don't know, maybe I could have even gotten like 7,000 out of it. Hindsight's always a little 20/20, but I just thought that was an interesting story. So, basically for the past couple of years, brokers have not needed carriers. Even during peak season when I was at Landstar, it was pretty okay. There was a little more equilibrium between what the broker's leverage and my leverage, But this was the first time where I just had a broker by his balls. He needed to haul the load, and $6,600, $279 per mile for a 2,300 mile load going to the Midwest, which is a good area, is quite good, right? That's pretty decent by any standard, right? I was able to slip through there. I was able to, not run into weather. And I thought this was just a very fascinating load where, yep, this was the first time since I started trucking a broker absolutely needed me to take the load. So this is what we ended up booking. Thought that was an interesting story there. And now we're headed to Helena, Montana, and then Cedar Falls, Iowa. So let's go. All right, so we ended up dropping that load out in Cedar Falls. No issues. Weather was clear, actually. In Montana, it was actually like 40 or 50 degrees or something like that. So it was real good. So I got it up there, dropped it, went over to the second run, just right across the 90 there, and dropped it in Cedar Falls, and we're good to go. And at that point, though, I did need to just beat feet back to the West Coast to get home for Christmas. So I ended up finding another load out in Wisconsin, going to Bullhead City, Arizona, which is pretty close to Las Vegas. So I booked that one, and that's what we ended up doing. However, the Bullhead City load is not going to make this paycheck, so we're going to go ahead and get into the spreadsheet right now. Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and cover week 41 and 42. So let's do it. For week 41, we did 2 loads. In those 2 loads, we got 1,546 miles. Paid a total of $3,400 at $2.20 per mile. Fuel expense, we fueled up 2 times. In those 2 times, we paid $716 at 46 cents per mile. Maintenance expenses, we had our wheel seals replaced on one of our drives and also put new tires on that drives for $2,898 at $1.87 per mile. Other expenses, scales $14 for 1 cent per mile. Fixed costs, APU payment came in for $418. OmniTrax payment came in for $37. That brought our total fixed cost to $455 at 29 cents per mile. Alright, totals for week 41. Total expenses were $4,084 at $2.64 per mile. Total revenue was $3,400 at $2.20 per mile. That brought our net settlement to negative $684 at negative 44 cents per mile. Alright, caveats for week 41. One caveat is this week is a little short. So the load going to Cedar Falls, there was at least 1 day on there, and there may have been a day and a half. I kind of forget what day I grabbed it, but that's why this mileage is so low, because the Cedar Falls load was partially on next week's paycheck, or next week's settlement. So that's what's going on there. And then obviously this maintenance expense, I mentioned it in my last video. So on the way, so I grabbed the load in Indio, California, started driving it up to Helena, Montana, and just outside Vegas, I just was doing a little walk around in my truck. I looked under and I noticed that my wheel seals were cracked on my front drives. So it's leaking oil on the brake drum. Cannot have that. That's immediate. Got to fix it. So dragged it over to the Petro in Las Vegas. Got it there and had the wheel seals replaced. And this is this drive did have the bad tires on it. So these tires were the original tires I had since Las Vegas when I was at Night Transportation. Excuse me, when I was at Night Transportation. So when I got this truck from Night Transportation, the tires were pretty much done for. I had them put a whole new set of drive tires on this thing, and this was the last axle that still had those tires. So they lasted almost 3 years, I think. But they were starting to get pretty bad, and I was planning on having them replaced anyway. And since they had to dismount the tires anyway, I'm like, all right, go ahead and give me a whole new set of tires. So this is both the wheel seal repair and new tires on that axle, and pegged me, just about $2,900 to get it done. Needed to get done. Obviously, if your wheel seals are cracked, can't do that. And needed new tires anyway. They were pretty much at 4/32, so it just wasn't going to work with those tires for much longer, and I was already planning on having them replaced, and that's what I ended up doing. So that hurts. Another giant maintenance expense right there, just about $3,000, a little shy, $1.87 per mile. That always hurts. And that's the big caveat for week 41, is that new tires and a wheel seal replacement. There you go. And then fixed costs, nothing special. APU payment came in, and then my OmniTrax came in for a little bit, but that was about it for week 41. So let's go ahead and move on to week 42. For week 42, we did 1 load. In that 1 load, we got 2,610 miles. Paid a total of $6,600 at $2.53 per mile. Fuel expense, fueled up 3 times. In those 3 times, we paid $1,131 at 43 cents per mile. Other expenses, scales $14 for 1 cent per mile. Fixed costs, absolutely nothing. Nothing came in for fixed costs. Alright, totals for week 42. Total expenses are $1,146 at 44 cents per mile. Revenue was $6,600 at $2.53 per mile. That brought our net settlement to $5,453 at $2.09 per mile. Alright, caveats for week 42. Not too much. I mean, just the 1 big load here for $6,600. Decent rate. Good rate, frankly. So that helped out a ton. Fuel expense, not much to talk about there. Maybe a little bit high. Nothing crazy. But I think the big caveat here is there is just no expenses coming in here. I mean, other expense, 14 bucks, that's nothing. And then literally nothing on the fixed cost came in. So that's always nice. And in the end, very low expenses and pretty high revenue equals a pretty banger week. $5,000, $2.09 per mile. That's good. Obviously, not a typical week, right? This might be my best week ever. Maybe. Not sure. I've had some comparable ones, but I think that probably tops it. I mean, when you have very high revenue at pretty good rate per mile, and no expenses come in, yeah, you're gonna have a good week, right? And this is pretty much the big caveat for week 42. Very good week because high revenue and no expenses. There you go. Now let's go ahead and move on to the overalls. All right, total since starting my own authority, we have driven a total of 99,069 miles. Total expenses has been $111,000 at $1.13 per mile, and that is my cost per mile. Total revenue has been $188,000 at $1.90 per mile. That brings our total profit loss to $77,000 at 78 cents per mile, and all of these loads are dry van. Averages and other information. Average weekly paycheck is $1,800. Average weekly miles is 2,300 miles. Total fuel cost has been $41,000 at 42 cents per mile, and we're paying an average of $3.34 per gallon. Total maintenance cost has been $29,000 at 30 cents per mile, and if we kept this up for a 52-week period, we'd make $96,000 and drive 123,000 miles. Total revenue has been $188,000 at $4,500 per week. Total deadhead has been 9,700 miles at 9.8% of total mileage. We've been employed 292 days or 42 weeks, taken 24 days off, 268 days on duty, 113 total loads for an average load length of 877 miles. And if we had a theoretical $500 per week truck payment, we would have made $56,000 at 57 cents per mile. All right, so how are we looking? Well, per usual, we're not looking great. And we're at $77,000, 78 cents per mile, and I don't think it's going to move much further at this point. So I've got one more load on me right now, going from Wisconsin to Bullhead City, Arizona. Paid somewhat decently, $4,000, so it's basically exactly $2 per mile to get back to the West Coast. About a 2,000 mile load. For that one, I'm just going to say I needed to get back, so it was just, it paid okay to get back to the West Coast, and that's what I ended up booking, but it's not going to matter. It's not going to move things too much. And we're going to book that load. I'm currently on it right now, drop it in Bullhead City, and then after that, I'm going to go home for Christmas. So that's pretty much that. And we're at 78 cents per mile, and I don't think it's going to go any higher than that. Yeah, so peak season's coming to an end, and that's about it. It was fairly decent peak season. I had a bunch of maintenance issues, which, that hurt. But, overall, I booked loads for $253 per mile this week, and then $220 per mile the week before, and then before that, I was at $216 per mile, $214 per mile. So during peak season, I was booking loads for probably an average of around $220, $230 per mile for decently long loads as well. So, that's an okay peak season for this market, right? I get it that nothing is good right now. So peak season went okay for me, but I just had a bunch of maintenance issues, and that sucks. And I was hoping that, the numbers would be a little bit higher during peak season, but I just had to cough up about $8,000 for maintenance. Let's see what happens if I increase that to $8,500. Yeah, so if I didn't have that $7,000 of maintenance expenses, it does go up to 86 cents per mile, right? But we did have the maintenance expenses, so that slowed things down. But even that, 86 cents per mile, still not very good, right? So this first year, overall, has not gone well, right? I'm not bragging about any of this. I'm just showing you guys my numbers. I will do the summary video at the end of February or the beginning of March. Not sure. But all in all, I don't believe these numbers are going to move very much from this point, and they may even go down a little bit. Yeah, so I'm taking all that time off during January. Probably just going to try to float and not lose money, right? Just try to pay the bills during January. Market's bad, weather's bad. I need to take some personal time off just to do a bunch of personal errands. I got to renew my authority, got to do a bunch of stuff. I just take a lot of time off during January, so January is not going to be good. And then February, I'll probably start running, but February is also just not a good month as far as the market goes, so I don't think I'm going to do particularly well there. And I think this is pretty much what we're looking at. Looking at right about 75 to 80 cents per mile at the end of a 12-month period. Yeah, so that's obviously bad. That's obviously real bad. But there is room for some optimism in 2026. Mentioned it a few times already. Well, I mentioned it a bunch of times already. They're starting to crack down on these foreign illegal operations. So that will help. That will have an effect. What effect? I'm not sure. It's going to help a little bit. I do foresee that. I do foresee these foreign drivers, these illegal operations, bleeding out of the market next year. And I think that will increase rates. By how much, I am not sure. I also have an authority with 1 year active authority. My insurance premiums should drop next year. I have access to all the brokers. I now have access to Amazon. And I've been looking at Amazon and their blocks that they have. They seem okay. All right, I don't think it's as bad as people have been saying. They seem okay, so we'll see what happens there. Not sure, we'll see how it goes. But I do have access to basically every broker and every load now, so that should help. My equipment is being depreciated, so if you look at this number right here, you got to minus a little bit, but I'm also paying down my APU and my trailer. So at the end of 2026, I won't have a trailer payment. I won't have an APU payment. So I am paying down some equipment as well. So it kind of balances out. But all in all, 2025, terrible year. I'm a little bit more optimistic for 2026. And if by the end of 2026, I'm still looking at 78 cents per mile, it's probably time to throw in the towel, right? It's just not worth it, right? It's just not worth it. Definitely going to keep going, definitely going to keep pushing, but things need to get better next year because 78 cents per mile, taking a huge amount of risk, a lot of headache, is absolutely not worth it. And I definitely could have done better or just as good, maybe just doing tanker fuel hauling or something like that. So gonna keep pushing, gonna keep going. But yeah, right now 78 cents per mile, and it does not look like that number is going to move very much at all going forward. Yeah, so the next video also might not come out for a while. Again, I'm taking Christmas off, and then I'm not going to be running very much. I may not take a load until mid-January, honestly. So I may not post a video for a month now. If I do, it'll just be a short update and not much to show. So just be aware of that. This could be the last video for a good minute, and we'll be taking time off in January, and then February starting to hit it again. But that will pretty much do it for this episode. If you're interested in this spreadsheet or any of the other spreadsheets I've done in the past, you can find them in the About section down below. After you find them, just click File, Download them to a Microsoft Excel sheet, and then you're free to use them however you please. If you need a factoring company, I am using OTR Solutions, so they have both factoring and fuel, so I use their fuel card as well. And I'm not just hawking you a product I do not actually use myself. I do use their fuel card, and when I need to factor a load, I do factor through them. So if you're interested in them, there's a link in the About section down below. If you get your own authority, please look into them and use that link. It does help me out a ton, so I really appreciate it. And if you wanted to just donate to me directly, you can use the Buy Me a Coffee link down below. YouTube does take like 30 or 40% of the super thanks. So if you wanted to donate to me more directly, you can use that link down below, and Buy Me a Coffee only takes like 3 or 4%, so it's a lot better. But that will pretty much do it for this episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.